We're at Xarez in Xarez, east of Évora, almost on the Spanish border. I'm standing next to a 12-foot menhir within a quadrilateral of standing stones. So it's like a stone square, if you like. Similar to what we see, there's one example like this in Carnac, Brittany. There's one example like this even in England, down in the southwest. But not many examples where you actually get a square or quadrilateral shape that the stones are arranged in. This has been moved from its original site, which was now been flooded by a dam, but they've replaced the stones accurately. To me, it just looks like a sundial when you've got this great stone in the centre and the shadows that it forms. It kind of just puts that into perspective that perhaps this is one of its prime purposes, because it was also on flat lands. It wasn't surrounded by any shaded trees or anything like that. So yes, quite an interesting site. The stones are fairly small apart from the great menhir in the centre. To me and to other researchers, it does suggest this was like a ting or moot site where people would give out their laws or customs or speeches or whatever to the surrounding communities. This is where people would meet and share that knowledge, and maybe its original location had some kind of energetic quality connected with that, like we see in many of the sites in Britain and around the world. So let's take a closer look at some of the stones to see if there's any clues as to who built it or why. And you can just see the way the shadow forms, and throughout the different times of the year and different times of day, that would actually then touch or point to these stones around the edge in the sort of square or the rectangle shape we have here. And that does suggest some kind of timekeeping device, although this may not be the purpose. It may just be my or others' interpretation of what it could be. It could be something completely different. But it's different to the other sites, the other cromlechs in Portugal, in that the stones are much smaller. There's only one large stone in the middle, the main menhir here, and it just looks and feels very different. This is the only one with a shape like this. The others are kind of oval, sort of semicircular. So this is quite unique, in fact completely unique, probably in this vast area of Europe. The only thing that comes close to it is a Quadrangle rectangle in Carnac, Brittany. So it's quite a beautiful, quite a remarkable site. Just over here, this kind of grabbed my attention. This looks like it's been carved out, like it's some kind of bowl or kind of grinding area. Now, if this has been carved out, it reminds me of some of the stuff, some of the kind of styles and techniques that we see in Peru, where they kind of have mortise and tenon joints, or they have just nobules sticking out and bits going in like this, like a large cut mark. There's another example over here. This looks more natural, like it's been naturally carved out, but you never know. It could have been grinding stones, it could have been something else. Apparently there are other menhirs like this large one scattered around the landscape, around the hills, suggesting it could have been some kind of system, whether it was some kind of geodetic system or whether it was some kind of calendar system, we don't know, but the fact that they were scattered around the landscape in various places does suggest some kind of organised culture, organised system of something they were trying to work out. And the immediate thing that springs to mind is obviously the calendar system, but yeah, it could just be it could be something quite different.
Well, the primary purpose of the megaliths, well, first of all, we have to divide the megaliths between non-funerary megaliths, the earliest ones, and funerary. And the earliest ones clearly seem to have as a main objective the control or the celebration of the transition of the seasons. because usually they are orientated towards the equinoxes, but they also have a relation with the solstices. Usually the megalithic enclosures, the center of the monument seems to be aligned with the rising of the equinox on the landscape, and then they also have an external relation with two standing stones, two isolated standing stones, one in the summer solstice and another one on the winter solstice. So just by following the movement of the sun on the horizon, they were able to predict the transition of the seasons. In the middle of when the sun is rising in the center of the horizon, you are getting either close to the spring or close to the fall. On the most northern point in which the sun rises in the year, you are approaching summer. On the most southern point, you are approaching winter. So the main layer of meaning on the oldest monuments seems to be the control and the celebration of the transition of the seasons.
You can just see an example of the sharp corners here. You can see the way it comes down here. It almost like pops out in the corner with this stone here and comes right back to the other stones going along in this straight line here. So yeah, it's quite a beautiful sight. The panoramic view of Xarez in Monoliths, Portugal. The great man here in the centre, casting its extremely phallic shadow. So what I did just find out from the local farmer is that this is the only part of this very close surrounding landscape where you can actually cool down and get in the shade. I'll just sort of give you an example. Suddenly you're out of the sun in the shade, which is kind of what you need in this kind of climate, to be honest with you. So not only is it a sundial, it's a shade. It's like a megalithic umbrella to get away from the heat, which is exactly what I need to do right now. Menhir de Beloa, just outside Monoliths, just up there in the distance, you can see this incredible standing stone, discovered once again in the 1970s, with some incredible carvings apparently, which we're going to take a look at. I don't know if we'll be able to see them in this light, but we'll give it a go. So just around this whole area there just seems to be all these standing stones, just single menhirs or just monoliths. And they just appear in different areas. I'm going to get GPS readings and I'm going to take a look at them to see if there's any astronomical significance, but also to see if there's any geodetic significance, because they could be marking some kind of grid around the area. They could be on water, aqueducts and things like this. Who knows what's going on underneath the ground. I've lost my dowsing rod, so unfortunately I can't find out directly, but we'll see if we can feel into stuff up here. I'll do a little bit of research. I'll check in with Mario as well to see what we come up with. But it's a beautiful looking standing stone. Take a look at this. I'm going to go up there and take a closer look. I'm going to point out where these carvings are, well, the best I can, as high as I can get up there really. But you'll see, you know, when they're pointed out that there's some remarkable and beautiful carvings that have lasted possibly over 5,000 or 6,000 years. This granite base was added later. You can see where it joins with the main monolith, and immediately you can start seeing kind of carvings and spirals and zigzags. And there's a shepherd's crook on it, as well as a sun symbol near the top. And so there's quite a lot going on this stone. It immediately, again, as we've seen at other sites, it reminds me of the sites in Quadrangle and around Brittany. That looks like the crook there. You can just sort of see that. We zoom in slightly, you can just take a look at that quite carefully. The sunlight is about right. I think we've come here exactly the right time to actually see some stuff going on this stone. It's quite beautiful. You can just sort of see curling lines with a crook in the middle.
First of all, the shepherd's crook appears represented since the Middle East all the way to Western Europe. But now that you are mentioning the connection between Alentejo and French Brittany, it's important to say that you have not only the same carvings as the shepherd's crook, but the monuments are built in the same material, granite, they present roughly the same chronologies. The same material culture is associated to the monuments, so there is very clearly a strong connection between Alentejo and French Brittany, and we can find anything that connects these two regions by land. So we believe that the connection that existed back in the Neolithic between these two regions must have been developed by sea, by traveling short distances along the coast.
It's well worth checking these sites out when you visit. Getting there at the time of day where the sun hits it. It's probably about 6:30 p.m. now. I'm here at this particular standing stone, so this is the one you want to get to around this time or even a little bit later to get the full effect. And even on this side you can just see some zigzags going up the stone here, which looks remarkably similar to the kind of styles we see in Ireland and at Brittany, particularly at Gavronese, the island of Gavronese. So it's just quite beautiful to see these spiral and serpents and curved lines on these wonderful standing stones in this part of eastern Portugal. This is known as Penido Comprido, or Long Rock, but also the menhir in the village of Uterio. Fascinating site, just another great standing stone, reminds me again of the sites in Brittany. Said to weigh around 8 tons, re-erected in 1969. Some say it's a phallic symbol and it was something to do with their fertility cults of the area, which kind of makes sense because it has a slit at the top, much like the human penis. In fact, Miguel Torga referred to it in the following terms: sacred phallus, winged hardness of granite, which, rendered pregnant by the earth, makes the infinite pregnant, which does suggest it may be a memory or legend or folklore of the ancient peoples of this area who worked with these energies of the earth, with these megaliths, to create this kind of harmonic fertility energy throughout the landscape, through themselves, through their livestock and through all the plant life they were growing to survive. So again, we're finding this in many different parts of the world, not just here in Portugal. Shadow starts all the way back here, goes all the way up. Maybe it has been deliberately shaped down that left hand side. It looks like it's been slightly flattened with a slight curve on it. Is that to make it look more like a phallus? Was that for an energetic, or do you think an aesthetic purpose? These standing stones are like just a mystery that have yet to be cracked.